All right, let's bring the lads up, eh?
Yeah.
These guys are definitely two of the most inspiring people I've met during this summit, and there's been a lot of inspiring people I've met. Not just our feature guests, but just the people I've been connecting with. There's been Aztecs from Porto Escondido. There's been blokes from Northern Ireland who grew up on the run from the IRA. There's just everyone's got a story. Everyone's been through their own hellfire in life, and these two lads have definitely been through that. And we're about to hear some stories from the theatre of war. Full warning about we're all. It's been a big couple days. Everyone's potentially a bit tired and emotional. And what we're going to hear now, I don't want to shade the experience too much, but it's going to be pretty full on. I just want to give all the boys all the support and goodwill and just good listening that we can. So let's get them out, eh? Get them out on board. Yeah,
Just grab a seat over here.
Yes, boys. Talk to us about the Swellness Summit. How's it been for you?
It's been absolutely amazing. First of all, I can't believe I'm sitting up here now with some of the fucking legends who have sat up here in the last 24 hours. Like, it's an absolute privilege and honour. And on behalf of the veteran community, thank you for everyone that's here and everyone we've come across and the connections we've made, because, this is perfect. And I wish there was more representation, and hopefully next year we'll get some more dudes up here and some of the girls have been in the veteran community. Yeah,
Can you guys just introduce yourselves and give us an idea about where you're from just before you went into service?
Yeah, so I'm Nathan. Grew up on the Central Coast. I guess I discovered the ocean a bit later in life. I was a young teen, had no, influence in what I want to do. I come from Housing Commission, everything else, and then moved to Central Coast and joined the Army at the age of 18. So I've had a long career. I only departed or transitioned to February this year. So I spent 22 years Army. A lot of tours, 6 in fact, multiple Afghan, Iraq, Timor, Solomon. So yeah, that was a bit of a history on me.
Yeah, I'm Ben. Thanks again for having us. It's such a privilege. I was in the Army for 11 years. Grew up all around the country. By age 10, I had made the choice to leave home. Pretty rough sort of home upbringing like Nate. And been through foster care, boys' homes. And then so when I finished high school, at the grace of the government paying for me to go to this hugely stupid fancy school, which I definitely didn't deserve to be there, but wanted to find that sense of brotherhood, family, mateship, and then so I joined up the Army, and a lot of different experiences, very similar to Nate, seen a few things, met a few wonderful people, and here we are.
What's when you first get in there after traumatic childhoods or a sort of negative experience of what's meant to be the golden years of your life? Like, what do you actually find with that connection when you first get there that's really positive? Like, what did you love about it?
I'll go. It's definitely the mateship and the camaraderie. It's tribal, and we've spoken about it all weekend. We are a tribe, and that's what the Defence Force and the Army offered me. Being infantry, we work in small teams, platoons, companies, battalions. And over a long period, I initially only wanted to do my 4 years. I'm like, that's it. Or 4 years, move on. But I stuck around. I just enjoyed it so much, just getting to hang with the boys. You did everything together. We got on the piss together. We worked hard together. We played hard. And then operationally, when you go overseas, you're in that small team environment, you're looking out for each other, and they look after me as much as I look after them. So I guess that's a bit of a segue into operations. Afghan was probably the big one for me. 2010, it was about my 4th or 5th tour overseas. We took a big hit. We lost 6 of our own members, and I wear a bracelet every day for those guys. And we lost a further 3 brothers in other units, and so 9 soldiers in a matter of months, and that's a big, that's that's a massive number of KIA for Australians since Vietnam. So, but going into, I guess, further down the track, mentally I started breaking, but I didn't know at that time. My body was breaking down, my mind was breaking, but I wanted to take the easy options. I didn't want to deal with my traumas and issues and PTSD and everything else, which naturally comes after all that service and all those trips overseas and losing mates, etc. So I needed to connect again with my mind. I had 4 shoulder reconstructions, my body was breaking, and I really had to tune into what I wanted with my career, and I knew it was coming to an end. So I took drastic action and started getting, suicidal thoughts. I had a plan, knew what I wanted to do. Decided to take some tablets one day. Didn't work, fortunately. But that, to me, that was the easy option. I didn't want to address my issues. My mindset wasn't in the right place at that time with the physically and mental injuries. So moving forward again, come out of it, and I started connecting with myself. And I guess it was the ocean that kind of got me. I went back to my roots, started surfing again. I formed a board riders. So we were surfing every Thursday, part of work, which is great. You get paid to go surfing. But I could see the mind change in the guys who were surfing. They'd go back to work and they were just, you could see they were just so lit up and so productive, and they were smiling and everyone was just enjoying it. It was growing quite rapidly. So, yeah, that was a transition for me out of the Defence Force after 22 years. Mind and body started breaking. And it was, it's the metaphor I use is everyone has a wipeout at some point, and, regardless, professional, amateur, whatever you're riding, everyone has a wipeout at some point. And you've got 2 decisions. You either paddle back out, get back in the line-out with a tribe, potentially some mates, or you go in, sit on the beach and just, feel sorry for yourself. And that's the metaphor in life that I like to use. It's, we all take hits. It's whether you move forward or, you can go sit on the beach and withdraw socially. Connection is key. And, the water is just that is the place to be. That's where you find yourself.
And I think we rely on those small teams so much in the military, and until a certain point we have those wipeouts, but we do it in a very intrinsic way. Because if you share it with your mate who's potentially going through his or own shit too, you're a burden. And then so we've developed this culture in the military where we're so disconnected largely a lot of the time with what's happening in the civilian world, in the real world. Yeah. And we choose not to connect with that because it's not our identity then. And then so when we leave the Defence Forces, Nate sort of mentioned, that transition can be a really challenging thing, especially for the men. I've still got to be the man of the house. I've got to provide. I've got to be stable. I've got to do all these things that we've intrinsically just grabbed onto as men. And we put all that pressure on ourselves. So there's sometimes a foundation of anxiety, PTSD, whatever it all is. And it's compounded by the fact of we can't identify an outlet to start speaking about that and start addressing those traumas. So we've got to go through this rigmarole process. It's difficult, and that's why we love what we're doing now.
Yeah, Ben spoke just about transition itself, and then when you move into the Defence Force, the Army is what I know, so that's what I can speak for. It takes 10 weeks to transition a civilian. So anyone here, you go recruiting, 10 weeks later, you're a soldier. And depends on how long you've done. The longer you've done, the harder it is to transition out. So for myself, after 22 years, I knew nothing about the outside. I didn't even have a fucking Medicare card. So I'm like, how do I organise this sort of shit? The Army's been looking after me all this time. So there's no transition process out. So that's why Ben and I, we run the Association of Veteran Surfers. So we fill that void and that gap for getting out. So you're not just kicked to the curb, and we grab those soldiers right there and then, and we don't give a shit if they surf. If they just want to be around the ocean, we'll connect with them. We'll go for a coffee, and we'll be that first point of contact, because otherwise they go into that social, isolation. They're socially withdrawn. They, sit on their hands and don't want to do anything. So we just try and grab them early and get them in the water, even if it's just to have a swim. It really helps them. That's why we set up Association Veteran Surfers. We've got the 5 chapters up the East Coast, Sydney, Newcastle, North Coast, Gold Coast, and Sunshine Coast. So, we're getting a lot of traction, and that's why we're here today, just so we can connect with you guys, and hopefully see us out in the big world. Don't be shy. Say hello if you see one of our shirts or anything. We're pretty friendly.
Man, the trauma of war is one of the most virulent strains of trauma. I look at, my great-granddad and granddad fought in the Great Wars or the Big Wars, and I can actually still see that trauma rippling through the generations, through my old man into me. And I guess, they say if you stop the cycle of trauma, you stop it for 7 generations, which is both, a nice thought to stop the pain leaking through for 7 generations, but it also gives you an idea of how hard it is to stop. What are some of the healing modalities, or what have you guys learned about PTSD? I mean, how does it happen? What can you tell us about this condition?
Yeah, I'll touch on quick. I think it's important to acknowledge that it's different for everyone. And I think we were saying before this potty that everyone's their own expert based on their own experiences. You're all experts of your own experience, and you know that, and that's a beautiful thing, because that's what makes us all who we are, and it shapes us, right? I think for us as veterans, there's a big process of denial for a lot, and we continue to find band-aid solutions, which are not the answer. Tom's been talking about that sort of stuff in the height of his career and stuff. Finding the right support. It's really easy, especially as a guy, to stay in that party scene and just, live the high life, creating facades for yourself. I don't know. PTSD is a really complex one, and I guess through ocean therapy is how we're trying to address that, as opposed to a prescriptive way.
I guess it's that's, again, we come back to why we created AVS, Veterans to Support Veterans. It's when it comes to PTSD, for me personally, it's about helping others, and I know you touched on it in one of your readings yesterday about doing things for other people. And that gives me so much gratification. But at the same time, I've got to be careful not to overflow my own cup by helping others too much, and not taking that step back to, bring it back to me, just and be present, and then give it. That way I can give more to others. And that's the way I've dealt with my own PTSD, is just to help others. I really enjoy, helping other veterans or anyone in general. It just needs a bit of clarity and perspective, and it's compartmentalizing that's the issue. If you pack shit away, it's going to come out in other ways when you least expect it. It'll just nod away at you, and it'll come out, and in anger, frustration, or other ways, and that's where we run risky behaviour. So you got to check yourself and don't compartmentalize it. And
changing the culture around that, changing that culture is such a difficult thing to do as well. It's a challenging thing. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, coming from low socioeconomic, that kind of football, toxic, that real macho realm, stepping into this and doing, breath work and meditation and yoga. I can remember, the very first day almost that I did yoga, and I just remember going, what the fuck? Is this you? Is this you? Are you seriously going to be standing there doing some weird pose? I was just so rattled by the whole concept of it. It was such a challenge to who I thought I was. And that ego and that identity was so fixed and in place, and those first few baby steps were so difficult. But fuck, I'm glad I took them. It's led to this place right here, right now. And it is a beautiful thing, and it's connecting all of us. In terms of, you talk about that transition from military life into civilian life, and obviously, everyone who's coming back from the theatre of war is basically going to have PTSD. Wouldn't you, close to it anyway? It's pretty hard. I'd imagine pretty hard to go there and not just experience something seriously traumatic that's going to shape the rest of your life. And, PTSD, I don't know if you guys have read that book, The Body Keeps the Score, but it is such a radical condition. The hallmark of it biochemically is a lot of cortisol flushing through the central nervous system constantly. Every time you're triggered, every time you have a blow up or a schwitz, your whole central nervous system just loads up with cortisol, the stress hormone, which is carcinogenic in large amounts. Cortisol cancels serotonin, so you will never feel any kind of you just cannot really feel happy when you're loading up with cortisol all the time. So you can do large tracks of time where you will never feel the sensation of happiness or contentment, and that will wear you down over time. And I guess in terms of transitioning, what does the government, what does the Veteran Affairs Association, what do they prescribe? What do they offer you?
There's a lot of support out there these days. It's not like Vietnam era where the soldiers weren't looked after too well when they come home. There's a lot for us. You've just got to seek it out, though. In terms of PTSD, when I was first diagnosed, I had no idea. I just sort of come with a stigma. Shit, am I supposed to be waking up in the middle of the night screaming, running out the front, digging a hole and, running from the enemy type stuff? It's not like that at all. To me, it's self-worth. And that's where it hit me, because the army had built me up so much and put me on a pedestal. I had a great career. But at the same time, it chops off at the legs. Like, once they're done with you, they're done with you. That's it. So it is, and it's adjustment as well on the transition out. And there is no single pill for PTSD. There's a pill for anxiety. There's a pill for depression. Everything. There's nothing.
So they tell you.
So they tell you. Yeah.
I don't think there is. I don't think there's a magic pill for anything.
That's right. Yeah. Yep. And that's where I'm like, okay, now I need to get the mind right. And it's combining everything: good nutrition, good sleep, mindfulness, meditation, yoga. I love yoga. It's awesome. Yeah, so good for you. Just that movement and the flow. It's just so good for the body. So if you can combine all that, I think that's probably the best thing. And there are a lot of, going back to defence organisations out there who are there. They're there to help, but a lot of them are large businesses as well. So, that's where we fill the void. We're not a business. We just want to help people.
Yeah, you're not a business. You're a human being.
Yeah, be a good fucking human,
organs
right?
and needs, and it's a sad fact that war is a big business, and there's a lot of money gets washed in the theatre of war and through the building of weapons, and then it makes sense. They'll build you up and tell you you're the man until they're done with you, and they'll just fucking chuck you by the curbside. And you hear a lot of that, particularly in America, coming out of the States, just how poorly their veterans are looked after there. And I don't know exactly what the situation is here, but in terms of some of the pharmacology of treating PTSD, what are you guys aware of in that space? I know MDMA therapy has been pretty promising. I've undergone that myself, and I know Gabor Mate, we talked about him yesterday, one of the great kind of doctors in the field of trauma. He's a big proponent of ayahuasca and psilocybin and some of these plant medicines. CBD oil, I'm sure it has some great benefits for inflammation, migraines, anxiety. It's an anxiolytic, scientifically proven to help with anxiety. Can you talk to us about some of the pharmacological interventions and where they're at legally, I guess, too?
Actually, I'm not 100% sure on where the legalities are at. I can speak from my own experience and that of fellow veterans of mine that I've served with that have gone down the prescription route like I did, and then have come back to receiving the knowledge about what is out there and the good talk that is going on. Had a good friend of mine that actually I went through all my basic training with, and he became one of Nathan's soldiers and deployed to Afghan very soon after our training. So when we're talking about the preparation that Nathan and I received before we went overseas, aside from the technical training, there was not a thing to warn us about. I think we got 1 or 2 maybe lectures from a army trained psychologist about what we might experience when we go overseas. That was amazing. Yeah, like, you know, and that's all. That was the job. And then before you come back from overseas, you fill out a 2-page tick and flick sheet, and then you're meant to do. And sometimes you slip through the system a 3 months checkup with your psych when you get home. That's the extent of the psychological support that we get either side. It's starting to improve. The military's made improvements there. But I think also touching back to sort of what that transition period needs to look like, it can't start with any one solution, whether it's pharma, you know, it's prescription, like alternative. It needs to start really holistically and look at the whole family, because the whole family serves too. The whole family serves, not just that veteran. They make the physical sacrifice, sure, but the family, they receive that emotional trauma as well. So our belief, I guess, is we should be looking at this a bit more holistically and doing proper case planning and case management for the transitioning veteran. So we go, okay, what's your plan over the next 3 months? Where do you see yourself? Just like you did when you're in year 10 and you were meant to know what you wanted to do with your life. Like, yeah. So, I don't know. I think any talk about anything is great, because if it's not surfing, could be horses, could be a therapy dog, could be whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, they call this, I think they call it stacking is the term, where you just stack healing modalities on top of each other and do it all in the same day and day after day. And over time, you will heal. You know, the brain and the body are amazing like that, their ability to regenerate. But it really is a matter of stacking those healing modalities. You know, we've been doing it here, basically. Meditation, Wim Hof, ice bath, movement, and then repeat in the evening if you can. But the problem is, you know, the way our system is set up, we don't have the time to do this shit. And I think that's bullshit, and that needs to change. That there is absolutely no reason why we should be worked as hard as we are. And, you know, let's be real, there's fucking billions of dollars just hidden in a cloud somewhere, or a bank account, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. And that needs to be, that time and that life force needs to be given back to us, so we can be given the opportunity to heal. And that's what this summit is about. It's about creating that space and time and opportunity to do that work together. It's a lot easier when you share the workload amongst yourselves, as you would have felt when you did the Wim Hof. Yeah, so, mate, I don't know if it's worth going into, like, but in terms of just giving people an idea, I mean, who haven't been to the theatre of war, like, you know, what it is that you see and have to deal with there. Is that something that is worth talking about, or like it's totally up to you guys? If there's value in it, I don't know if there is, but yeah, I mean, obviously no one in this room has seen what you guys have seen, and I guess you can maybe give us an idea of what that is, and maybe that'll have some value.
Yeah, so when it comes to, I guess, different theatres, so I've done from peacekeeping right through to, you know, full-blown out war, where we're losing guys, shooting, you know, we're engaging with an enemy. But when it comes to the peacekeeping stuff, you know, it's a bit more low-key. You know, we might be just walking down the street, and in every country that I've found, the one thing that is always the same is the children. So when I've been asked, why did I choose to join the army? Why do I go to war? I don't get into the political sense of it. All right? I didn't do it for the government, you know. I did it for the people that I was working with, you know, my mates. But going back to that kid, every country, you've got 2 options when you're walking past a child. You can tell them to go away. Yep. Like, they become annoying. All they want is water and crayons and a lolly or something. Every country, no matter what. So you've got 2 options there. In a place like Afghanistan, if you tell a kid, you know, go away, piss off, you know, Emshi, you know, that kid, you know, 10 years down the track, he'll remember that. He'll remember that soldier that told him to go away, and all he wanted was some water, you know, or, you know, just some engagement with a Westerner. if you take the time and give that kid just whatever he wants, a sip of water or a crayon, potentially you could stop him from becoming, an enemy insurgent or a Taliban, ISIS down the track, because he will remember that. He will remember that soldier that gave him the lolly, gave him the drink of water, and that could be the turning point. Because let's be honest, Afghan went for 20 years. Some of us, my child's 15, he's nearly old enough to fight himself. So, that small kid could be fighting against my own child. So, and that's why I did it. The children, they're just so beautiful in every country, and in terms of what we've seen, what we've done, some shitty stuff, some real shitty stuff. Watching your mates, being shot, being killed, blown up, it's not nice. But it always comes back to that small child and why we did it. So that's my philosophy on it, and that's what kept me going.
Yeah, it's I think survivor's remorse is something that survivor's guilt is something that is really common for us veterans. We feel that shit all the time. I was telling a couple of guys last night, sometimes Anzac Day and Remembrance Day, we sort of see that as the overall commemoration, but it's those individual days that we deal with where we lost good mates of ours. And that survivor's guilt is a really big thing. And I think the fuck thing is that's come out of my services, I've lost more mates of mine to suicide than I have in combat, which is so super fucked. And that speaks, I guess, back to the volumes of, and actually the only time we often catch up as veterans is at fucking funerals. That's so fucked up. I don't know any other job in the world where that's like a standard thing, and that shit hurts. I'm probably at a stage at the moment where emotionally I don't know if I can go to another funeral, whether it's family or a veteran, or it's sort of, it rocks me, and it'll rock me for like a 3-week period or so after, where I'll just, that survivor's guilt and, remembering the look on Jackie Gavin's face when we lost Luke in Afghan, the look on Haley's face when we lost Tristan to suicide, the look on my mate H's face, and on his family after he took his own life on base, and the night before he'd only asked me to come around for a beer. That kind of guilt is stuff that is really, really fucking difficult to talk about at times, and it's H was the funniest guy in the world. Got a tattoo on his groin with an arrow saying "Eat me." That was the type of larrikin that H was. He was meant to be the MC at my wedding a couple of weeks later. It's this sort of shit that we don't see, and it's such a fucking annoying thing when someone goes, "Yeah, but you knew what you were signing up for." That's like saying everything that in your life that happens that's bad. You've lived your life. You should have seen it coming. It doesn't check out. Recruitment's got a funny spin on things.
I wanted to ask you that. Thanks for sharing, man. Thank you. How do you guys, with the trauma that you've dealt with the, getting to this point, finding mechanisms to stay healthy and to stay positive as best you can, how do you reflect on your decision to sign up, to sacrifice your life for whatever the greater good was, whatever the message was? If you met the younger you on the day that you were walking in, what would you say?
I'd do it all again.
Yeah, I'd definitely 100% do it all again. I've no regrets. It's an outstanding career choice, and it's just so, you have so much pride that you get to wear the Australian national flag on your arm and represent us, and you just have to be a good human, and you will be a successful soldier. And
is there room for that? No, yeah, is there room in the army to be human, or are you actually sort of drilled to be a machine, a cog in a machine?
It's a bit of both.
Yeah,
it's a bit of both. It's a balance, and I think when you as you progress through your military career, you develop maturity. For any job, the more time you spend in any job, like you're going to become more wise about what's going on, and you get better and you achieve recognition. It's a very similar analogy to something that people say, why do you want to go overseas? It's like training with a professional sports team and never getting to play a game with them. That's how we kind of describe the want to go overseas and the want to deploy and wanted to be, we're in a very alpha type job when we were in the military. Like, we're big dogs. Like, it was that sort of macho mentality and the want to be the best version of yourself, not for yourself, but for the guy or girl next to you. Like, that was what you worked for. And that's a hard thing to separate for and try and explain to people that don't do that type of job. Very unique.
But going back to that human question, yeah, you can. And, a great example that I like to use is one of my soldiers was killed on the 24th of August 2010 after a 3-hour firefight. Once the fight had finished, we'd all been hooking in that day pretty hard. Most of us had given CPR, obviously wasn't a success. But once we got him out of there, we had to go back, clean up his room. My job at that time, I was a sergeant, was to inventory his gear. And he shared a room with two other guys, two of his mates. So, the human factor I had to be that stand-up guy, that leader, but at the same time apply the human factor. So, I was exhausted myself, still had dirt in my teeth. It was a pretty big day. Hadn't drank or eaten, but I had to get those boys out of the room so I could go through his stuff and inventory everything. So, that is just the human factor. I had to be the human, but also I had to be the leader. So, if you can recognise that time to be the human, and that was the example I'd use, and it wasn't being that hardened person, like, you pack his fucking shit up, inventory. I had to be the human, and because I had to look after them, and because they're my soldiers, I had to look after them.
What Nate actually means is he had to go through the mate's porn collection and make sure it's all deleted.
I had to do a bit of vetting. Yeah.
And this might be naive. It's a big picture thing. I mean, I don't have the experience to really talk about this, but I mean, have we reached a point in human evolution where militaries could be deployed to, build infrastructure instead of blow it up?
Well,
and drop aid instead of dropping bombs.
Well, that's been the intent. Without going into the political part of it, one of our missions was to reconstruct and rebuild, and that's what we did in Afghanistan. We went over there, we started reconstructing, then we started rebuilding, and then we started training their defence force, and getting them to stand on their own 2 feet. And subsequently, it hasn't really worked, has it? But, like I said, I don't get too wrapped up about it. We lost some ground over there. We've lost soldiers, they've bled, on that dirt, and that dirt now it's back to the Taliban. So, we can't get emotional about it. It's just the nature of the gig. But yeah, hopefully we're doing a lot more domestically now, like all the floods and fires that have been happening. That's where our Defence Force, and during COVID, who was standing at the hotels? They're all soldiers. And, I joined the Army in 2000, so it was a great time because we were bouncing from operation to operation, country to country. And so I was lucky, just going straight from Timor, boom, Afghan, Iraq. I was just going from one country to the other, and at the same time maintaining a family and everything else at home. So, but now it's a different time. Most soldiers are just helping out domestically, and I think that's where a lot of our effort needs to be. Let's look at the home.
Fucking oath, man. I mean,
let's look at the home.
It's our money, Yeah. We're spending this money on the military. It's all taxpayer funded. I had the great pleasure of working alongside the military during the flood relief down there at Wardell, fucking just working with the toughest chicks in the game, just like, oh, you need a hand of that wheelbarrow. They fucking laughed in my face, dude. Just like, what are you going to do, stick man? Yeah, that was such a great experience, and I 100% agree. I think, it's such a great experience to work with, these salt of the earth, hardened, well-trained personnel in a compassionate way, in a compassionate field, and I think that is the future. I hope it is anyway, because I'm sick of war, man, but and violence and all of it.
But yeah, lads, I think on behalf of everyone, thanks very much for your service. Thanks very much for coming and sharing your stories today. And it's just been a real thrill to have you guys here and sharing in the, some of the tools that maybe you can take back to the veterans if you're not using them already. I'm sure you probably are, but every little thing that has happened this weekend, I've been pretty amazed. Even if I thought I knew, even just the dancing, getting involved in that and just freeing up the body and feeling like I was entering a new space, it all helps. And I hope it helps you guys as the veteran surfers keeps ploughing onward.
Thank you so much, boys. Thank you so much. I love you.